MAGA is proving how little it actually cares about gun rights. God, I'm guessing they cherry picked and twisted a certain quote off the internet from somewhere. I mean, that's all it takes, right? You just find one person saying something, then you sort of askew it a bit, and you can put that as your title without staying awake at night thinking, "Oh God, I'm such a liar." Well, thenation.com is a very leftist website, but here we have an article which I found sort of repulsive because there's a lot of lies going on in the Alex Preddy thing by the government, and it's pretty easy to stick to those. But instead, the left wing just decided to make up their own lies, which I found weird. Like it was weird when the government like really doubled down on Renee Good being evil when you could have just said it was an accident and she was at fault. It was an accident because she tried to resist arrest and flee, and no one wanted her to be shot, but that's just the way it was. Like they could have just said that, and they didn't, and they went double down on it. And here it's like the same thing. It was like everyone's just lying about things. Like the left wing doesn't really need to lie regarding Alex Preddy because the government's already said some ridiculous stuff, like totally ridiculous stuff. Like they claim that he was out there planning on doing like a mass shooting or whatever, which there's no evidence for besides the fact that he had multiple clips of ammo and a gun. Like you could say that about loads of people. It's ridiculous to say, but instead, what does the left wing do? They lie. They lie. They lie. They lie. They lie. They lie. So look at the little excerpt here below the title. The ability to kill dissidents at will is more important to Trump and his supporters than the Second Amendment. Wow. So you're basically just calling the president a murderer, really, aren't you? I mean, and not to mention all of his supporters, whatever that's even supposed to mean. I mean, when did we get to the point where you could just say whatever you wanted about anyone on the internet? It's a bit crazy to think that magazine articles can just come out and say things like that. Well, moving on to the article itself, we have a quote by AOC to kick it off. You are defending the open killing of everyday Americans for exercising their constitutional rights. Yeah, well, this quote is more likely to do with the comments made by Trump and Patel regarding them having a gun, or Preddy having a gun during protests, and other people as well potentially having guns during protests. But as the narrative of both the government and the article is regarding Preddy in all of this, I think it's fair to mention that he wasn't killed because he had a gun. Everyone knows this. It's also fair to say that had he not been resisting arrest, impeding and so forth, that none of this would have happened. This would be a running theme in the article, so keep count of how many times they insist that resisting arrest is a constitutional right and that he was killed because he had a gun. And as you can see here, the author wants the Second Amendment repealed. Wow, no kidding, who would have thought? They again say that Preddy was killed because he had a gun, as if that was the reason he was killed in the first place. I need to remind you, already, this article's purpose, because this is written by an anti-gun leftist praising the Second Amendment and using the Constitution as a shield, as they have just said that they want to rip it apart and make it the way that they want to be, who is accusing the Republicans of wanting to do the exact same thing, really, but it's bad when the Republicans do it and good when the Democrats do it, because when the Republicans do it, they're crazy authoritarian fascists, and when the Democrats do it, they're holy super galaxy brain, most moral, most ethical. It's unbelievable to me. They are clearly trying to spin this to create the narrative that the Trump administration is violating the Constitution and that everyone except Democrats is in support of that because these people, centrists, right-wing, whoever, they're not out there undermining and impeding the government like the Dems are. So they're in favor of the Constitution being destroyed, basically, and that makes them bad people. Considering how poorly accusations, guilt trips, and the magical spell of Constitution, Constitution, Constitution has worked so far, I'm almost impressed by their commitment to the scam. They're certainly level 99 professional victims. Now, before I continue, I will say that the government and many right-wingers have been making egregious claims without any appreciation for nuance, context, and sometimes even truth, which is an objectively detrimental thing to the narrative. Some have been even celebrating it, which is just as sick as people celebrating Kirk's death. You can perform mental gymnastics to make one thing seem more sinister, but as you would call Kirk's thing an assassination, and so would I. A lot of people call Pretty's thing an execution. But at the end of the day, both of these things didn't happen because of guns. They happened because of words. And also guns. But the point is that they were both convinced to... Well, actually, if you include all of the other people, like Renee Good and stuff, they're all convinced to be where they were, doing what they were doing. Pretty shouldn't have been killed, but he also shouldn't have even been there to begin with. Even despite this new footage of him kicking the ice car and a mad rage and all of that, I still think that people like him, Renee, others as well, I think they are gullible, good-hearted fools who have been convinced to think that they are legitimately fighting against a tyrannical dictator who's trying to destroy the USA. Yes, they are fighting. Yes, they are potentially violent, maybe dangerous. I'm not saying that everything they're doing is like, overall good. I'm not saying that. But I do legitimately believe that they thought what they were doing was the right thing. I pity them. And any disgust I have lies not on their shoulders, but on those who would spur them onwards. And I've seen many more right-wing commentators saying the same thing, from the tamer ones to the more evocative ones. They might have some or no sympathy for those like Good or Pretty, but in the end, they too blame everything on politicians and other influencers and police and whoever is in some sort of position of power or influence to whip the civilians into a frenzy. So, moving on, they remark about how the government claimed that Pretty was violently resisting, claims that he was an assassin, claims that he committed domestic terrorism. I do believe these remarks by people like Christian Ohm are at least twistings of the truth, if not simply exaggerations or maybe even outright lies in some cases. I believe it's another case of caring about being right instead of what is right. For instance, Director Patel, I think, when they said that no one shows up to a protest with a firearm, they were twisting the rationale of people's minds. Like, oh, yeah, why would you? Into, so he must have been doing something wrong. It's a thought much easier to incentivize when combined with other things like kicking the car. And it's a thought I myself had, like right off the bat. Why do you need a gun when you're intentionally following around groups of armed agents? Like, if you're going to use the gun on them, I mean, that you wouldn't want to do that, but why? Like, you don't need it to protect yourself, do you? Like, it's not like you're going to get mugged and, oh no, I've been mugged. Wait, there's 30 guys right there with guns and pepper ball guns. Like, you wouldn't need the gun for yourself in such a scenario, really. So I'm still like I understand someone taking a gun out without the intent to use it, but it's an easy narrative to spin and to be worried about as well. And I also believe it's crazy to lie about something that is provably untrue based on numerous recordings. Like, there's a million different narratives about what happened. Even God, that one guy with the AI generated picture that was like blown up and put on a canvas that he presented. Oh God, that was unbearable. But when faced with both lies and exaggerations, what does the left do? The exact same. Why? It's just like with Renee Good. The government didn't need to spin some narrative. She was in the wrong. The agent had no time to think, and that's all you needed to say. Here with Pretty, the agent was in the wrong, and the government said some pretty egregious things. The left has no need to tell tales, and yet there they are. So here they again insist that him impeding officers and resisting arrest is a constitutional right, which it is clearly not. They also claim that he was summarily executed, as I mentioned, which, even if you believe the agent in question did it on purpose, it would be a deliberate manipulation of vocabulary to phrase it in such a way as to incentivize outrage towards the government through the manner in which it happened, as if it was a direct order, which it clearly was not. But then again, if you remember that little thing that they put below the title of this, the headline of this, that they just want to kill anyone they disagree with, well, then the narrative of this person becomes a bit clearer. They exaggerate the Second Amendment as sacred in the eyes of the right wing, whilst the left wing incessantly vomits up the word Constitution, as if there's some sort of difference between those two things. They say it proves MAGA loves authoritarianism more than the Constitution. Believing in the Second Amendment doesn't make one MAGA, just to say that, and it doesn't mean someone agrees with Trump. It doesn't make them authoritarian. All of this kind of stuff existed before Trump, but for some reason now everything has to be about Trump, which is probably because the left wing is only going to these extents because they hate Trump. These are lies, no different than what any Republican has said on the topic, and possibly worse than some. Bizarrely, they state that the NRA put out a mealy-mouthed statement, because they cannot say anything without insulting the person first, in order to pre-charge their readers for what they are supposed to believe. This statement alleges that Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is to be blamed for stirring up trouble and calling for more investigation into what happened. But Governor Walz did stir up more trouble. They then immediately credited them for standing up to Trump's comment, stating, this is Trump's quote here, "If you approach law enforcement with a gun, there is a high likelihood they will be legally justified in shooting you. Don't do it." This is the quote that sparked this ridiculous mentality of leftists thinking that they could own the maggots by claiming, actually, it's the right that hates the Second Amendment, and they're authoritarian because of it, and the left wing loves the Second Amendment. As if they weren't calling the right authoritarian fascist before or something, that they had to just do it again in a different way, I guess? I don't know. I mean, it's the same as always. Anyway, Trump's comment was nothing more than words, and the left can't go 2 seconds without shouting Constitution in reference to a signed document. Further, Trump was just saying that going to a protest full of violent rioters with a gun is a recipe for disaster. He wasn't saying that you can't do it. He was telling you not to do it. There's a difference. It's like advice. I mean, it's advice from a president whom you think is an evil dictator, but whatever. I think it's sound advice personally. I would never advise someone to go to, especially something like the Minneapolis riots. Sorry, peaceful protests. But just in general, like, if there's a bunch of police officers out there and they're high-strung and ready for it, then a gun just seems like a bad thing to throw into the mix. And I'm not sure if the FBI Director Patel was accurate in saying that you can't go to any kind of protest you want with a loaded weapon, but it would make sense to me that some places disallow guns. Like, personally, I would not try to protest on White House grounds while carrying a gun. And I would not suggest that the disallowance of that is unconstitutional authoritarianism. It just sort of makes sense. No one needs to carry a gun to peacefully protest at the White House. Now remember what this article is. A hyper-leftist trying to own the right. This article is written by an anti-gun leftist who is praising the NRA right now for standing up to Trump regarding his comment, which can be construed about some anti-Second Amendment thing, which can then be construed as some anti-Constitution thing. None of that makes any sense unless you remember that they are trying to portray non-Democrats as being anti-Americans who hate the Constitution. They're trying to portray the right wing as being anti-American. Meanwhile, the Democrats, who want to bring in infinite immigrants with no questions asked from anywhere in the world, they're the pro-Americans. Jesus fucking Christ. Moving on. Now, they state that these comments are in effect, the comments by Patel and Trump and that, they claim that they are in effect arguing for severe restrictions on Second Amendment rights. And they say that as if it's like, oh, they're taking away our rights, just like Hitler did. Well, from what I recall, Hitler was elected on January 30th and became dictator on March 23rd. I think it was those dates on the same year. And Trump has been president for over 5 years now, right? If I'm remembering correctly, with an interim there in between with Biden. And still, like, what horrible things have happened since then? I think, like, I understand what a lot of people are saying, but I think they're also blowing things just a little bit out of proportion when they're comparing him to Hitler, of all things, who literally speed ran dictatorship. Anyway, they're claiming that these Second Amendment rights about Democrats are hypocritical because they didn't call for this when MAGA showed up with loaded weapons. And I think even without seeing any kind of proof of that, which the link they provide I will show, the distinction is still obvious in that MAGA was not stalking, harassing, abusing, and impeding federal agents in their duty. Here's the image they provide and the link they provide. This the poster listed this as Arizona 2020. It looks quite a lot different to the so-called protests in Minneapolis, doesn't it? In fact, isn't that one holding the flag closest to the camera? Isn't that a little boy? That's like a 12-year-old boy. Yeah. See, that's a kid, and then there's a stroller next to them. And I've seen people bring their children to the Minneapolis protests as well. The children, babies even, they say that, well, why should my kid be more important than anyone else's kid? Well, they should be more important to you than other people's children, right? But you're bringing them out surrounded by whistles constantly blasting, by cars honking constantly, by people screaming slurs and threats constantly, and tear gas and pepper spray and all of this. And why is that happening? Oh, well, it's because of the evil authoritarian government. Or it's because of people like you who are causing the government to do those things. And then the peaceful protesters, they armor themselves up with masks in order to fight back against the government, don't they? But here, these masks that they're wearing, as you can see from the surgical masks in the background on people as well, well, this was in 2020, so they're COVID masks. There's a sickness going around. Really, I mean, you can just look at how far apart everyone is from each other to sort of guess that there's something a little bit different from Minneapolis, where they're usually just some big blob of people. And I don't know. I mean, this looks really peaceful to me. Why would you use this as your way to own the Republicans by comparing them to the Democrats? Why not use January 6th? I mean, you're always using that anyway, right? Isn't that always the go-to reference for Democrats? So why not use a picture of that? This does look dystopian, but at the same time, you know what else I notice? All of the flags are American, and none of them are upside down. I don't see any pepper spray. I don't see any tear gas. I don't see anyone screaming or throwing things. The guns, the flags, all of that is just symbolic of what they believe in. I guess screaming and blowing whistles is symbolic of what the Democrats believe in. So they quote a few more people saying things that are basically the same thing as I've already mentioned, and they muse that if the cops have the right to kill you for carrying a gun, then you don't really have the right to carry the gun to begin with. So they're utilizing the same lie that Pressy was shot because he was carrying a gun to hit their thumb. How many times now with that same hammer? 3, 4? I've lost count. And that's about as much as the government has, really. Like, everyone's just smashing their hammer with lies regarding Preti. Anyone with a brain knows it wasn't because he had a gun. We all know the gun was disarmed. We all know that he was resisting arrest. We all know that resisting arrest is not a constitutional right. And what are they trying to say here? Well, if cops have a right to kill you anyway, then there's no such thing as the Second Amendment? So you're basically saying the Second Amendment no longer exists, but you're also saying that Republicans are trying to destroy the Second Amendment and that left wing is trying to save the Second Amendment. Well, which is it? Nearing the end now, they again lie by stating that MAGA, which they use as an insult, even though MAGA aren't embarrassed by being MAGA, so it's not really an insult. They don't understand how insults work. Anyway, they're stating this lie that MAGA clearly values authoritarianism over anything, even their beloved Second Amendment rights, because of course every MAGA person is clutching their M16s at night, and that besides being authoritarian, they are also tribalists, in that only the correct people can have guns, after failing to realize that what they've done is just make an incredibly embarrassing one-to-one comparison between the tribalistic Democrats who covet the Constitution and this fictional version of Republicans that they have just created. They then dive into their tribalistic claim, stating that MAGA believes that only the correct people should have guns, and that they, of course, the author of this, they tie it into racism, as this website is extremely prone to doing, just based off of the front page, which has an article headlining the claim that race-based terrorism is the tradition of the USA, a long-standing tradition. I mean, Jesus wept. But I would remind everyone that the correct people having guns is the law. There are plenty of people who aren't legally allowed to have guns. That's just the law. They then heavily imply that the bad guys are the ones who now have the guns, aka the government, and the good guys are the ones who aren't allowed to have the guns, aka the Democrats. Finally, they suggest that more progressives will start carrying guns, and that this will prove that the right wing hates the Second Amendment, which will also prove that the right wing doesn't care about the Constitution at all, and are completely willing to bend knee to an evil dictator. That's the future they prophesize. I mean, good God. The only part of this that's true is the ridiculous quotes by right-wingers making up ridiculous lies. Literally everything else is either them lying or just so full of their own shit that they're projectile vomiting diarrhea everywhere. This is fan fiction. Like, a lot of it's not even lies. It's just straight up fan fiction. It's cringe. All you had to do was call out the overclocked Republican lies stating that he was about to go on a mass shooting or whatever. That's all you had to do. But you went even further beyond. And now, you seem crazier than them. Good job, Dems. Dug your own grave. Again. Anyway, thanks for watching.